morning. It's Mamaw Yates, and I am ready to finish up with you on Task 4. Today we're going to be talking about Task 4, Prompts 3 and 4, which are evaluated with Rubric 18. So if you don't think you have a Task 4, you might be right. Task 4 is only for those folks who are doing the elementary combined um, handbooks, which have 18 rubrics. Most folks only have 15 rubrics, and then world language, of course, has 13. So far in my series on Task 4, we have talked about um, setting the context, which would be describing the class and your learning segment, and those would be your artifacts, Part A and Part B. And then you have analyzed student work on that original learning segment that you taught. Now, also your cooperating teacher could have taught that. That's also an option. But once you've done that, then you've analyzed the student work and you've come up with a common area of struggle. And so that brings us to this final part of designing now and teaching a re-engagement lesson. Now, don't let the word re-engagement throw you. It doesn't mean anything differently than the term remediation or reteaching. Um, I feel that they've used this term as a way to be more specific to this task, but it doesn't really have any practical difference. So what you're going to be doing is that once you've found the common struggle in the original assessment, you're now going to think about a different way to teach it, and you're going to design and teach that lesson, collect the work, and then evaluate the effectiveness. So that's where we are. And so far, of course, now you have identified the learning target. Now, the learning target would come directly from your analysis that you did of student work from the original formative assessment. You would find a common area of struggle, and now you come up with a targeted learning objective. So say, for example, you had been working on addition and you found that students struggled with a specific thing. Maybe there was a common error or a common misconception. Then that would now become a targeted goal. So instead of a very broad goal or objective, we're now very targeted. You're going to design a re-engagement lesson based on that goal. Now, the good news is you don't have to write a formal lesson plan. You will be, though, however, in prompt 3, describing this lesson. Once you've described the lesson, you're going to teach it. Now, it's important to note that you need to be using a brand new strategy or a very different strategy from the one you used in the new lesson. This re-engagement lesson can be taught to just your 3 focus students. You can do it one-on-one. You could do it with them together in a small group, or you can do this re-engagement lesson with the whole class with the 3 focus students present. You're going to now collect, there should be a new formative assessment that you've created. It should be different from the original, and because it's on a targeted objective, right? So you're going to collect those work samples, and they can be text files. I usually call them document files, either scanned student work, or if you had primary grades and you wanted to do a video or audio file, you could do that. Now, if this oral assessment is given to students participating, together, like you're in a group and you're having each of them do it, and basically the assessment for all 3 students would be in one video. You can do that, but you have to upload that little video 3 times. So that you've got work sample A, work sample B, work sample C, and then you would describe that, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So that's going to be your part F, examples of student work from re-engagement lesson. Then you're going to evaluate the effectiveness of the re-engagement lesson and think about its impact on student learning. And you'll do that in your commentary, which is in the assessment. Now, one thing that's not brought up very much, when you have this re-engagement lesson that you're designing, you need to remember that you're also creating a new formative assessment. And that formative assessment is going to be um, put at the end of your commentary. And we'll look at that when we get to the end of this presentation. You'll see how that's done. So what does it mean to re-engage students? It means to reteach and remediate. That's what it means. But you need to use a different approach. When revisiting a topic, effective teachers use a different approach. I'll never forget one time I went to um, a fly fishing class on casting, and not much fun. I don't recommend it. And I wasn't doing something right, and the instructor wasn't very effective because he just came giving me the same instruction, the same correction every time, and it wasn't working. And so instead of changing what he told me, he just continued to repeat himself. Well, any educator knows that's poor instruction. You have to be effective. You have to think of a different way. Okay, that approach didn't work. How can I do it differently? So that's what you need to do with your re-engagement lesson. You need to think about the struggle and how you can target on that struggle. So you want to teach that re-engagement lesson to your 3 students. That can be within the context of a whole group, a small group, or you can just teach each of them one-on-one if you want to. But you need to collect work samples. That's very important because you have to have those as your artifacts for evidence. And it's going to be what you use to support your analysis. It's just important also that your instruction during the re-engagement portion of the task must specifically respond to that struggle that you talked about when you were discussing the original work samples. And you want to make sure that when you're planning, your goal is to show growth for the focus students. Even though there might not be growth, that's your goal. And it won't hurt your score if your students don't grow. Your score is going to be based on how well you analyze this. Here's part F, examples of student work from re-engagement lesson. So you've already submitted 3 work samples, and that was from the original assessment, right? Well, you're going to do 3 more. Same students, different work, because it's going to be a different formative assessment. And you need to make sure you remove their names and replace it with student A, student B, or student 1. Then when you name the files, you need the file. When you save it to your computer, you need to name it student 1, re-engagement work sample, student 2, blah, blah, blah. That's so you can differentiate these work samples from the original work samples when it comes time to upload. Even if you have a video, like I said before, if you have a video where the students are being orally assessed, you need to upload that video 3 separate times. It can't be over 5 minutes. And then in prompt C, you're going to be talking about where that which student, how do you know which student is which? We'll see that in a minute. Make sure you have the word re-engagement in your file name. So here's from my friend Nikki's portfolio. She's got focus student 1, 2, and 3. That's from their re-engagement lesson. Thank you, Nikki. Nikki's got a wonderful Facebook group. If you've not joined it, it's called EdTPA All Day. And she also has a teacher pay teacher account that you should check out. So this is the question that you're going to be working on. Sorry, here we go. Um, Developing students' mathematical understanding. Based on your analysis, this is 3A, of the focus students' work sample, write a targeted learning objective or goal for the students related to the area of struggle. And this is the area of struggle that you talked about all in the beginning of this task. And so you're just literally going to write an objective. You don't have to give any kind of explanation. You can see that Nikki just wrote an objective. Now, when we're looking down here, it says to describe the re-engagement lesson. And your description should include. Now, basically, this is your lesson plan that you're going to be writing in a narrative. I find one of the best ways I would approach it if I were doing it is that I would do like an outline or put it in an outline fashion. So my suggestion for completing 3B is to start out with an introductory paragraph that states the common struggle that you found earlier in the task and then states the targeted learning goal of the re-engagement lesson, making that connection between the common struggle and the learning goal. Then specifically state how this re-engagement lesson is going to differ from the original learning segment. How is it going to differ in strategies, tasks, representations, materials? Because that's really what the score is looking for. So I would lead with that. Then make sure that you have all these bulleted items. Bullet the items yourself. Targeted learning objective, write it. Your standard, your task, your representations, and instructional materials, and then your assessments. This is very straightforward. And besides what you go over right here, um, this is just really more reference information for Rubric 18 more than it is anything else. Now, before responding to prompt 4, you're going to now need to teach that re-engagement lesson. So you're going to teach it. You don't need to record it. And like I said, you make sure that your 3 focus students are there. You need one-on-one, small group, or whole class, but your focus students are there. Now, in your commentary prompt, in what form did you submit the 3 work samples? You're going to delete the 2 that you didn't use. So if you had video files, you'll delete these 2. If you had audio files, you'll delete this one and that one. And of course, if you had written work samples, you'll delete those 2. And then down here, I never have understood why this question is not coming right underneath. I mean, to me, in my mind, this should be 4B, but it's not. It's down here in 4C. And basically what you want to do is that you want to tell if you did do a video sample or an audio sample, how do we know which student is student A, B, or C? Is it the boy in the red shirt, the girl sitting in the back? How do we know? And this is really the meat of how the score is going to score Rubric 18, right here in 4B. So let's take a look at Rubric 18. Okay, first of all, we're going to start with a level 3 because that's what a scorer does. They're going to look and see, did the candidate use evidence from student learning from the 3 work samples to describe whether or not the re-engagement strategy is effective? Now, if you don't state whether or not the strategy is effective, then you're going to get a 1. Or if you state that it's effective, but you don't provide any evidence, you're going to get a 1 or a 2. if it's not based on the learning target that you talked about earlier, then it's going to get a 1. Or if you just cite other evidence that's not in your work sample, and that's all the evidence you've got, that's going to be a 1. So a 3 is really just talking about the evidence from your work sample and saying, this is how I'll know whether or not the strategy worked. And the more specific you get, the better your score. So if you're really being specific, as you can see in problem number 1, student A wrote blah, 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 and this is different from the original work when they did the same type of problem and they did blah, 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 blah. So you really, it really gets into the nitty gritty of this. And then if you can get level 4, you can get up to a 5 if you're able to analyze the change in student work by discussing how it applies to their mathematical understanding and misconceptions, and talking about how that also relates to the new strategies that you used in the re-engagement lesson. So this is basically what we're looking at, and I have a more detailed outline. But basically, what this rubric means is that you want to restate clearly the identified area of struggle and the targeted learning goal of the re-engagement lesson. You want to state very clearly whether the re-engagement lesson was effective. Now, it could be that it was effective, sort of not. So you can say that it was effective, it was ineffective, it was partially effective. But you need to explain what you mean if you start saying it was partially effective. You're actually going to explain all of it. And then you're going to support this assertion that it's effective by talking about specific examples for each focus student. So you can compare their original work with their second work, discuss any changes or lack of change by using specific examples. You can see here, look at this. Has there been a change in mathematical understanding or misconceptions? Can you see that the student has now begun to understand um, the concept better? Is the student now able to apply the computation strategy better? You need to explain, and you're going to so you do that for each of these students. So let's look at a more specific example of an outline. So here's the question. Um, Analyze the effectiveness of strategies you used during the re-engagement lesson to develop students' mathematical understanding in the identified area of struggle. Consider the change in mathematical understanding or misconceptions. All right, so your introductory paragraph, I think, should be the common struggle I discovered from the original assessment was. Then talk about the mathematical understanding or misconception. So here you're kind of giving an overview of what you've discovered. It's effective or not. The targeted learning goal, my re-engagement lesson was. So this was the common struggle. This is the target learning goal. And it was related to mathematical understanding or misconceptions. Then you want to describe briefly how the re-engagement lesson differed from the first. You've already talked about that in more detail. Here's just a brief, you know, reiteration. Then you're going to discuss the effectiveness. State to what degree the re-engagement lesson was effective or ineffective, and why you feel it was effective and ineffective. So that's going to be like your introductory paragraph. And then, whether or not you have 3 full paragraphs for here or not is kind of up to you, but you need here next your in-depth analysis of each work sample. Compare work samples, the original to the new, discuss changes by using specific examples. Quote the work sample, point to the work sample. Can't can't emphasize that enough with you guys. Has there been a change in mathematical understanding or misconceptions? Explain. What's the change? Why do you think there's a change? Connect this to the strategies used in the re-engagement lesson. You're going to do that with A, B, and C. Okay. Now, Here is Nikki's work. She approached it a little bit differently, but her work was good and solid. Um, it's a good model to see how someone else has done it. So she's got an introductory paragraph. She states that her re-engagement lesson was effective and that they all met the objectives. And she relates it to conceptual understanding. And she says by showing evidence. So she's giving a reason for that. And then she discusses the questions, how they did. So she's really getting into the evidence there. I hope that you will tell other people about my work, that you will like and follow my channel, and that you will help other people find these materials that have been helpful to you. I hope you have a great day, and I know you're going to be a great teacher.